Welcome to episode 87, Spotlight, Separation of Duties, also known as Control AC-5. Separation of duties ensures that no single individual can complete critical actions without oversight. It is a safeguard against fraud, error, and misuse of authority. The principle is simple but powerful. Distribute key responsibilities so that trust is shared, not concentrated. Without separation, even honest employees face temptation and unchecked mistakes can go unnoticed. This control turns accountability into a design feature rather than a moral assumption. In modern environments, digital, automated, and complex, separation of duties keeps privilege from quietly becoming power.
Two-person controls reinforce separation by requiring independent verification for high-risk steps. These are sometimes called dual authorization or four eyes checks. Examples include releasing large financial transfers, modifying security configurations, or approving production changes. The control ensures that at least one additional person reviews and agrees with an action before it takes effect. Technology supports this with workflow tools that enforce multi-party approval. For instance, a code deployment system might require sign-off from both the developer and the release manager. The simple act of introducing a second pair of eyes turns secrecy into shared accountability and makes intentional misconduct much harder to hide. Enforcing separation through roles rather than policy prose keeps control grounded in technology. Policies can describe the principle, but systems must enforce it automatically. Role-based access control, for example, can prevent conflicting permissions from being assigned at the same time. A configuration rule might block adding both create vendor and approve payment privileges to a single profile. This approach eliminates reliance on human memory or goodwill. Embedding separation into system design transforms it from an aspirational guideline into a mechanical reality. Controls written in code are harder to ignore than those written in documents. At times, temporary overrides are necessary, but they must be handled with documented approvals. Emergencies, small teams, or system failures can require combining duties briefly to maintain operations. In such cases, written or digital authorization should specify duration, justification, and compensating safeguards. For example, an administrator might receive both configuration and deployment rights for 48 hours to address a production incident. The override must expire automatically and be reviewed afterward. These procedures show that flexibility exists within structure, but always with oversight. Temporary authority should feel deliberate, time-bound, and visible, not an informal workaround. Automation helps detect toxic combinations of access before damage occurs. Modern identity systems can analyze role assignments and flag users whose combined permissions create conflict. For instance, analytics might reveal that an employee's memberships in two groups, procurement and accounting, together grant control over both purchase and payment. Automated detection reduces reliance on manual audits and keeps pace with organizational change. Alerts prompt remediation before incidents, not after. Continuous monitoring turns separation of duties from a static setup into a living safeguard that adapts as roles evolve. Proactive detection makes compliance both stronger and faster. Break glass paths, emergency access mechanisms, must be excluded from normal role combinations to preserve integrity. These accounts, or credentials, provide elevated privileges for critical recovery scenarios, such as restoring service during an outage. They should never be held by individuals with regular operational control. Activation must be logged, time-limited, and followed by review. For example, if a security administrator uses a break glass account to re-enable directory access, that activity should trigger an alert and post-incident verification. Mixing break glass and standard roles defeats the purpose of separation. Keeping emergency power distinct preserves the trustworthiness of routine controls. Reconciliation between approvals and execution records ensures that separation is not only designed but demonstrated. Every high-risk action requiring dual authorization should leave evidence linking who approved and who executed. If a transaction was released, the logs should show matching approval records. Discrepancies reveal either control gaps or potential manipulation. For instance, if a file transfer occurred without the corresponding second-party sign-off, auditors can investigate immediately. Reconciliation transforms logs from passive archives into active assurance. It ties authority to outcome and confirms that process and performance stay in sync.
Transfers and dual hat scenarios pose subtle risks that require regular review. When staff move between departments or take on multiple temporary roles, conflicting permissions can accumulate. An engineer promoted to manager may retain technical privileges no longer appropriate for their oversight position. Regular audits should flag such overlaps and force a reevaluation. The risk is often cultural rather than technical. People value convenience and may resist removing old access. Addressing these overlaps promptly demonstrates that separation of duties is a living principle, not a one-time setup. Clarity in responsibilities sustains fairness and trust across transitions. Common pitfalls include implicit power concentration, where one person's informal influence overrides structure. Sometimes this happens when long-tenured staff hold tribal knowledge or control small teams without oversight. Another pitfall is designing roles too broadly, giving the illusion of separation while preserving overlap. Quick fixes include narrowing privilege scopes, automating reviews, and ensuring leaders model compliance by following approval processes themselves. Separation of duties fails quietly when convenience trumps consistency. The cure is clarity, accountability, and tone from the top leadership that treats shared control as protection, not constraint. Metrics bring measurement to this discipline. Useful indicators include the number of conflicts detected, the time to resolve them, and the percentage of roles covered by attestation. Trends show whether governance is improving or drifting. For example, a steady decrease in conflict duration signals faster remediation and growing maturity. Metrics also justify resource investment, showing that prevention saves more than correction. Quantifying control performance transforms an abstract principle into operational insight. When metrics become conversation starters, separation of duties moves from compliance checkbox to a continuous improvement loop that sharpens both culture and control. In the end, a fraud-resistant and auditable role design depends on thoughtful separation of duties. AC-5 teaches that trust without verification is fragility disguised as confidence. By distributing authority, enforcing two-person checks, and monitoring overlaps, organizations protect integrity in both finance and technology. Separation is not about creating barriers. It is about ensuring that no one carries unchecked power. When roles, evidence, and reviews align, control becomes culture. The result is a resilient organization where transparency deters misconduct and collaboration replaces suspicion, proving that shared trust is the strongest safeguard of all. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.